Fast Yearly Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.
And we're live. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the new season of Tome Traveler, the original tabletop RPG pop culture retrospective show, which is a nice way of saying we talk about games and game history. So tonight I am playing with a full house who always says jokers are wild. So let's have everyone introduce themselves, explain what they've been involved in, and say what their favorite classic card game is outside of tabletop RPGs. So, who would like to get us started with an introduction?
Well, I can.
All right, Shireen, absolutely.
Hello. I'm Shreen. I'm also Mad Fishmonger online, although I'm not really all that online these days. I do some writing. I have written for Capers, which is a game we'll be talking about today, and a bunch of other games for Nerdburger, and also just some other stuff. And I also do some sewing on a 110-year-old or 20-something-year-old treadle sewing machine, which is super awesome.
Wow, nice.
My favorite card game is tough, but in high school we used to play Cheat. And my buddies, a couple of my buddies started taking, like once we got really good at it, a couple of my buddies started taking Cheat to the whole next level and like actually stuffing cards into their sleeves, things like that. So yeah, we
Awesome.
played extreme Cheat.
Well, awesome. All right. Well, who would like to go next?
I can take the hit here.
All right, Anthony, please.
Yep. So I'm Anthony, better known as Librarian NPC. I own a small business called Pithy Productions that does tabletop game design and 3D printing. Before I got into that, I was playtesting and editing and just wore many hats in the community. So yeah, that's the long and short of it. The favorite card game, I think I would have to lean into Canasta.
Ooh.
I learned how to play that, oddly enough, during a time living in Japan with a group of European students. We just hung out in the community room one day, and they said, "Hey, have you ever played?" No. Well,
Ooh.
here we go.
Awesome.
You have now.
Yep. And it's still up here somewhere.
Nice. All right. Well, then, next up for introductions, who would like to go?
I guess the other Midwesterner will go.
All right.
My name is Ted. My partner and I, Aaron, we haven't been on the shows in a while, but if you're an old-time fan of Rook and Rest, you've probably seen us around a bit. We released a game called Suited, which is a tabletop RPG that is entirely card-driven, and it's all randomly generated. So it's designed to be generated, characters, story, everything, and run within about 5 minutes time. As far as other stuff, I've freelance written for Pinnacle Entertainment Group for a couple of the Savage Worlds titles, and then I've also done some third-party Savage Worlds games as well. But I am a avid tabletop RPG card game collector. I have an entire shelf dedicated to nothing but RPGs driven by cards. As for
Sweet.
favorite card game, sorry, John, I know I'm going long.
No, please.
I got to go with either Euchre or Egyptian Rat Screw. And if we're talking trading card games, then obviously it's got to be Magi Nation.
Nice. All right. Well, then, going around the group, I think we haven't heard from Nathan or Sean
Okay.
yet. Sean, you want to go?
Yeah, I'll go next. Hi, I'm Sean. Also online, you'll know me as Bink26. I'm an old timer here on Rick and Rasp. I've been streaming before it was even Rick and Rasp with John and Roxy and everybody. My daytime, I'm a data analyst. I do things with data that doesn't make sense, and then at night, I'm either playing games or reading or painting minis. My favorite card game, if we're talking about like a vanilla card game, then it's going to be poker. And then as far as TCG, since I've been around for as long as it has, I'm going to go with Magic the Gathering.
That's definitely a fair one to bring up. Yeah. Especially since I guess it has its own RPG setting now. So hey,
It does, yeah.
yeah.
I
All
mean,
right.
it's fifth edition, but yeah, it's a setting.
Hey, I'm always a believer that any setting can be used in anything else. So, but going on then, Nathan or Todd, y'all are who would like to come in next?
I'll go.
Yeah.
I'm Nathan, he, him pronouns, and I use online. I'm not another Nathan. Been on random RPG channels here and there as I pick up a game. In between some stuff right now, but I'm looking forward to some conferences here this fall. My favorite card game is probably Spoons with the family, but Magic and those type of games have caught many hours and much of my money as well.
Awesome. All right, and we have one more guest for the evening. Todd, you up for it?
I am up for it.
All right, Todd, please.
So my name is Todd Crapper. I think I've been on this show once before, and now I've decided to make it a bit of a trend. If two counts as,
Yeah.
and I'm been designing games for over 20 years now, mostly through my own published print games. But I've also done a fair bit of freelance work around the for a bunch of people that all of us at Rook and Rasp know quite well. In fact, half of the games that are being run on Seriously Let's Play, it turns out I had a hand in some way, shape, or form. Half the logos on that page, on that sheet, are my logos.
Which I freaking
So
love.
I know, me too. Total bragging rights is what I have at the moment. So yes, and I'm also a co-host of the Come Instead podcast with Danny Delisle, who is a friend of the show. And I'm also working on a new podcast of my own, which I've not yet announced the title, so I'm going to do it right here. It's called Cut the Crap, Todd.
Nice. Good play on words there, bud.
Thank you.
All right. Well, and of course, I am John Thompson here at Rook and Rasp, and I released a game called Gutterpunk. But other than that, I'm getting into freelance writing myself, and my favorite, as it was said, vanilla card game is actually going to be bullshit or BS. I played that when I dropped out of band, of all things in the world. When I dropped out of band in high school, I had to sit in the cafeteria with all the other band dropouts because we would still get a grade. We did our time enough to get a good grade, and we sat in the cafeteria and played BS under the watchful eye of one of the, I think it was the principal or somebody. So, yes, I dropped out of band. Y'all now know that as part of history on this channel. And of course,
to the lore.
hey, and then I went into making music other ways. So hey, it's all good. But
We used to do
tonight,
that in high school too. We would just skip class though. So
oh, nice. Well, tonight we're jumping straight into a mechanic with a successful community. In my opinion, that with its history and culture nearly rivals the D20 fandom. If you've ever been a part of the tabletop like card playing culture that is out there, there is the lingo, there are the people that are involved in it, they know each other, the creators know each other, and it really is a tight-knit community once you get into it, in my opinion. And that's saying something, I think. Todd, what do you, or not Todd, Ted, what do you think? I'm kind of curious.
I'd say it's been pretty successful. Yeah. No, it's there's a lot of stuff out there. People just aren't aware of it. There's a good number in print. There's also a good number digital. And yeah, they're there if you look for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have one that some people here on this show and who will see this or listen to this later may be familiar with, and I'm going to hold them up to the screen. This is one of my earliest exposures to card games being used in a role-playing game. And I'm going to hold these up, and you tell me if you remember these, anybody. Anybody remember these? No?
Trying to see him.
Ah, I'm gonna come a little bit closer to the camera.
Oh yes.
Now I
I don't
guess.
think we have. I know that phrase. I was big into LARP in the '90s. Um, our group, we have actually a really amazing gaming community here in Winnipeg. Which being not that big of a city and kind of being in the middle of nowhere, you wouldn't expect. But we had very long winters,
Mhm.
so we gamed a lot because there's really not a lot else to do. And we ended up, we had a vampire LARP that was over 100 people at the university at one point.
Yeah.
There was also concurrently running a couple of other vampire LARPs. There was a changeling LARP and a werewolf LARP as well.
Yep.
But I don't actually remember ever using those cards.
Yeah. So these cards here, when Vampire went through, everything went through the end times. It was the Judgment times in the first series of the LARPs. They switched over to a card game based setting to leave behind the paper, rock, scissors. Which, of course, that looks great on camera when I do that. So yeah, they used to run on paper, rock, scissors, and then they're just like, no, we're going to switch it up, and we're going to bring in numbers rather than story elements, because it used to be you would bid words in your gameplay. You would bid, "I am determined to do this." You would bid a word off your character sheet, and then they went to numbers. And this is one of the decks of cards based on a standard playing deck of of essentially the exact same idea that so many games are based off of, which is that D10 mechanic. But I think it's not. Here's one of the things I want to say about card games is that when a game involves cards, when a game involves playing cards of one way, one sort or another, it's like that becomes the defining feature of that game. Even if it's not central, even if it's not the central like purpose of the game, that game kind of becomes defined as, oh, that game uses cards. Much like there are many games out there that use a D20, but that D20 becomes the defining feature, even though it might use other dice. What are y'all's thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
especially
would
when you're
have.
introducing it. Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
I just think, especially when you're introducing it to someone new,
Mm-hmm.
it is probably one of the first things you bring up. It's definitely one of the things I bring up when I'm trying to get people to try something other than D&D.
Yeah.
Like, hey, there's a whole new thing you can try. Woo!
Now, most of
Yeah.
y'all, at least three people here, I think, have been involved in a game that uses cards. Uh, you know. So, Ted, how do you feel about that?
I actually, obviously, since I have an entire shelf of games using cards, I like that mechanic, and it is one of the first things I bring up. And people tend to act dubious at first, and then they usually enjoy themselves and kind of find themselves in the draw mechanic and trying to count the cards and a whole bunch of different stuff. So, yeah, I like it.
Todd, what about you?
For me, I find it's much more accessible to try and introduce somebody to a game that uses playing cards because it's a fairly safe bet. Let's put it this way. If you get suddenly stuck at a cottage and there's no power, there's probably a deck of cards somewhere. Some of them might be beer stained, but there are decks of cards. It's almost like when you have games that only use D6s, they're far more accessible. You could crack open any kind of board game. More than likely, there's some D6s in there. Whereas a D20 is very specialized. It's a very specific thing that has become a signature of RPGs. In It was one of the things that almost made it feel very exclusive in the very beginning because you had to go to a store that sold these things. Back in the day, you specifically had to. So the idea of using playing cards, I find, is more approachable for someone who hasn't tried it.
Yeah.
Because, and a lot of people know that playing cards are used for numerous different. There's no one game that, personifies what you use playing for. They're used for a multitude of things. So I think, using that stretch to say, it's like, well, what if I told you that we could use playing cards to tell a story of Wild West characters trying to, confront, cowboys. Okay, it's like, yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I find it's very digestible for people to latch on.
Yep. And then Anthony, I believe you've also got one. What are your thoughts?
It actually is a major selling point for a number of people. When I explain to them that they don't need to go out and buy buckets of dice, that they can literally grab a deck of playing cards from the dollar store, and then that's all they need to play. In fact, my game Dualities, I always pitch it as you only need some pencils, note cards, a deck of playing cards, and this book. And then there they go. They're off to go tell their own stories. And knowing that that's all they need instead of what is expected, I'm putting that in quotes, of RPGs with the whole battle maps, minis, 6 rule books and screens and everything else. Like, no, you can really condense it to something small. It's just a matter of how do you approach it and how do you pitch it. And I always found that card mechanics are interesting because of that very reason. They're approachable, people are familiar with cards, and it's just, you can put so many spins on it. Just like how there's hundreds of games you can play with those cards, there's hundreds of ways you can use those for a tabletop game.
Yeah. Well, moving into what I love to do on this show is the retrospective part of it. So for our retrospective flashback, I wanted to really look at what was the first use of playing cards, or at least the first recorded use. And what I found after some investigation was that on July 17th of 1294, the Ming Department of Punishment caught 2 gamblers using paper cards. The guards took the cards and the wood blocks used in the printing process. This is the first recorded instance of a card game in history, but it is argued that it likely existed in China since the 9th century. So I think that's pretty awesome, and giving an idea of where it all came from. So card games reached to Europe around 1360 through merchants from Egypt in a game known as Mamluk, which I had never heard of before until there was a book series getting started called The Adventures of Amina al-Sarafi, which, if you've never heard of, highly recommend. It is about a pirate that basically operates off of the shores of Africa. It's a female pirate, and her going up against the different governments from all over the place. Absolutely loved it. Great book. Second one comes out later this year, I believe. So that was my first exposure to that game. But as far as like coming to Europe, your first European cards were influenced by that. They were hand painted, and it was in the 14th and 15th centuries that we finally got to the Latin suits. But the first time that RPG games were used, or that card games were used for the RPG narrative, was a game in 1984 called Saga Roleplay System by TSR, and it was crafted by a creator known as Sue Cook, now Sue Wineline, who was the creative director of Dragonlance, the brand manager for Marvel Superhero Adventure game, and she is also responsible for developing the web enhancement concept in tabletop RPGs, where bonus content is put online to accompany a role-playing game. She was the person that started all that up. So huge shout out to her. I believe she is now somewhat retired from the tabletop scene, but definitely deserves a nod for that, doing that for us. So, but events that also took place that year. And I always love bringing this up. And if you have some or thoughts as we go through these, I would love to get it from my panel. So other famous events in 1984 to give a flavor. The United States extends full diplomatic relationships to Rome under President Reagan. Which, did anybody here know that we did not have diplomatic relationships with Rome until 1984?
I'm Canadian. Y'all didn't have diplomatic relations with
I'm
Rome. We
also
were fine.
Canadian.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. See, exactly. Exactly.
I must have missed that little nugget in European history.
And here's the funny part about all this. Now, as the history books record this moment, the event that kind of brought Reagan and Pope John Paul together in that moment, they had a bond that they shared in common, was that they both had attempted assassinations that year. And that was their nugget. That was their little bonding moment.
Yeah, Pope John Paul came to visit here,
Mm-hmm.
and the hill that he stood on to address everyone is still called Pope's Hill.
Yeah. So funny little thing. So now Steve Jobs launches Macintosh. Apple was already around. Apple II had already come out, but Macintosh. This was the year of that launch. So we had talked about that in a previous show. Not fun, but still memorable. Michael Jackson's hair catches on fire during a shoot for a Pepsi commercial. And I don't know if any of y'all remember the signs.
Media would not let you forget about that one. They made sure everybody knew.
Yeah, and the signs and the protests and everybody, not so much protests, but like the, Save Michael Jackson posters out on the street outside the hospital. And yeah. Now, how about big one? And Ted is here. Ted's back for this. So,
Uh-oh.
Ted, how about the TED conferences are founded in 1984?
Everywhere I go, I can never escape the TED Talks.
Yep. But I had I thought they were somewhat recent myself because they've gotten so much bigger, but they were founded in 1984. Fun one, and I'm not supposed to say this word, so I'm going to call it the LA, because streaming rights. I don't know if anybody's heard about all this kerfuffle. We're not supposed to say the O word. So the big global competition where many countries come together that took place in LA, Russia boycotted it. So this was the year that Russia boycotted. We had boycotted the previous one because Russia was going to be there, and they were invading Afghanistan at the time. So we boycotted those Olympics. So interesting. Oh, I said the word. Oh, well. I don't think I'm going to get a copyright strike on that one. Oh, well. But now,
Naughty.
truth.
Nonsense.
It is, but they don't care what my opinion is. It's all about the Benjamins. Now, this is the year of Thomas the Tank Engine's first broadcast. Now, that I can talk about him. They don't care if I say his name.
I don't think it came into Canada. I don't remember that.
You don't remember?
We didn't have Thomas the Tank Engine until later. Because, I remember when I was working with kids, there was a lot of that. But when I was a kid, we had the Big Friendly Giant and Mr. Dress Up.
Okay.
Yeah. And that we didn't have.
Yeah.
We didn't have that.
See, for me, it's always going to be the Skyrim, when somebody took the dragons out and made all the dragons Thomas the Tank Engine. That's going to be the defining moment for me without all that. So, But now, here's a good one. Terminator comes to theater that year. Terminator. I absolutely love that movie. I think it's a career-defining moment for Arnold Schwarzenegger, obviously. And there were a couple people in that also are famous. I think it was Michael Biehn, and who else was in there?
Linda Hamilton.
Linda Hamilton, yeah.
Yep.
And then Bill Paxton, yes.
Yep.
So God bless the man. Killed by both an alien and the Terminator. I think he gets to hold that as a badge of honor.
And a Predator. He was also in Predator 2, so he got the trifecta.
Oh, yeah, he did, didn't he?
Yep.
It's like some
Beat me
kind
to
of
it, Todd.
some kind of actor achievement, like you get a little award, was killed by.
Yep.
But
Hey,
know what didn't get him? Weather.
weather.
That is true.
Truth.
That's right. Yep. The wind.
And they tried hard to get him to.
So if Sean Bean is the Sean Bean of fantasy, then he gets to be the Sean Bean of sci-fi, right? Is that how it works?
Yeah.
I mean, does
Yeah.
this just mean that anytime we mention fantasy, it's Bean, and anytime we mention sci-fi, it's Paxton? Just two entirely separate awards.
Exactly. There we go.
Yeah.
Let's start it up right now. So it's going to be an award that we do.
Make it a thing.
It's a thing.
There should be the Bill Paxton Award for Best Sci-Fi Death at some kind of an award function every single year.
Hell
Just
yeah.
how, yeah.
I'd sign up for that.
I mean,
For
the
my name on
fact,
that petition.
you know what though, the fact that the actor has actually passed away might make it a little more difficult to make that sell. However, in the spirit of, I think still definitely one.
We just tack on memorial to it because God bless him. The world misses him, So the first Band-Aid concert series is held, and they know it's Christmas after all is recorded as well in 1984.
Oh, those songs were so everywhere.
And
I can still hear them now. If I think about it, I can call up the vague, melody of how it went.
Yeah.
That's how pervasive they were.
I was, God, where was I? I think I was at Walmart getting my oil changed, and the Queen video of Queen performing at the Band-Aid live show that they did for it was on the TV there because they had the DVD of it. So definitely a very memorable series of things. But final event that I have is that Desmond Tutu received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1984. So that to me is a pretty good event to kind of go out on for things from there. Does anybody have anything they want to share from 1984, or pretty much everybody can't remember much?
No, actually, this is kind of cool. 1984 was the first hackers conference. That's the elite conference where all the software engineers and everybody would get together to discuss what's going on, stuff like that. So,
Hack the Planet.
yep, that's my guilty pleasure movie right there.
Oh,
yeah.
my favorite. Absolute favorite. Absolute favorite. No, not even guilty. I have no shame.
Yeah. Well, moving on then to our topic of the evening. And that's that cards can be used in many ways, from tracking initiative to plot development to being the core resolution mechanic. And that there have been some amazing titles over the years that use playing cards in many ways. And we have a list provided to us tonight by Ted Pick. But there is no possible way, I feel, to cover them all. So we definitely want to toss out the salute. And Ted, do you want to read it off, or would you like me to? Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
There we go.
There we go.
There's more that's not on this list that should be on here, but quick rundown, just small list. Saga System from TSR, Through the Breach from Weird, Hands of Fate by Audio Samurai, Fiasco 2, Bully Puppet, Changeling the Dreaming, White Wolf, Everwave, Wizards of the Coast, For the Queen, Evil Hat Productions, Winterhorn, Bully Puppet Games, Ghost Court, Bully Puppet Games, Campfire Horror Stories, 2021, Story Games LLC, Phoenix Dawn Command, Alice is Missing, Renegade Games, Home, Wet Ink Games, Gablonia, Wicked Clever, Eternal Contenders, Chronicle City, Deliria, Laughing Pan Productions, Suited,
Yes.
by Skatebox Games, Capers over there from Nerdburger, and of course, it doesn't actually use a deck of cards, but it uses note cards, so I added it to the list. Microscope.
Nice. Thank you so much, Ted. It's a heck of a list to put together, because really finding out, the information of like card games when they all started up has been hard. Like, in the end, I managed to have to say, okay, date that this was published. And it came down to Saga System being the first. But today, I feel we're very lucky. We've got creators amongst our panel today who have worked with cards. So I want to ask you all some questions on the topic. And for my panel here, what advantages do you think cards offer in terms of game mechanics? What do you think it offers that maybe Dice doesn't? So.
I think it's the familiarity, and for one, but I think like even in capers, the way the mechanics are done, it's sort of got a gambling vibe to it. And if you know how to count cards,
Hmm.
you can actually do that. And I think that's definitely an advantage because if, for example, if I've been playing and I've got my deck, you shuffle your deck when you start, and all I've pulled are low cards.
Hmm.
I know I'm inevitably going to pull a higher card or face card at some point, right? And so that was one of the big draws for me when I like Capers was I think I'd heard of games that used playing cards, but I never actually sort of sat and played one.
Hmm.
And Capers was the first one that came across, kind of came across my table that had that, and it just blew my mind. It was it was so huge to have this level of agency as a player, where it wasn't just pass or fail. Either you roll high enough or you don't, and that I could play around with that a little bit more. Like that kind of gave me that little bit of a like, okay, I'm pretty sure I can choose to fail this time because I know I've got a good card coming up, and I'm going to save it for something good. Like you can actually kind of um, balance and like you can't exactly decide that you're going to pass because
Yeah.
you don't know, but like if you're really good at counting cards, you might actually know what card is coming up.
And it's
But
Okay,
yeah,
you could admit you were going to say cheat.
well, because and I mean, because of course when Craig, we talked a lot about the mechanics of the game, and he's like, I know people can do this. Like it's not a secret. It's not like it's a learned skill. So like if you know how to do it, I don't want to punish you for doing that.
Yeah, no, that's
It's not technically cheating if you just can remember and
yeah.
have worked it out, then
And
good for
thinking of
you.
it from that way, like so a big game that has a lot of influence in a certain tactile sense is Dread because it uses a Jenga block. And is it cheating to stack the stack the things against your other players or to take certain pieces? And if it's not in that case, I don't feel like it is in cards. But what would y'all say about the rate of balance with that complexity and with game accessibility, especially? Todd, I know you are a huge fan of accessibility. Uh, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely think it's one of those things. Accessibility for me and a lot of other people that I've talked to, accessibility is something when there is the potential for there to be greater accessibility, simply hasn't been done, is when it definitely feels like it's a lost opportunity. I've spoken to a couple of designers who have been bending over backwards to make a far more accessible version of Dread, since you bring it up,
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't involve the use of Jenga tower. And in that particular case, though, I tend to think because it has a very tactile response, it does something very specific in a very specific way, replicating it in a completely different method to me is kind of like that's an almost kind of completely different discussion.
Mm-hmm.
In the sense of like you're almost trying to create a different kind of game altogether. It's not like when they made Dungeon World and said like, well, we want to take D&D, but we want to use it with this PBTA system where you're just rolling 2d6 all the time. You're to me that's a bit of a different outcome than when it comes to wow, this book is written in a very awkward font that's difficult to
Mm-hmm.
read. Why would they do that? Why would they have, and I was guilty about this in my early days too. Why are they using red text? Red is the most commonly difficult color for people to see, let alone read. I was like that. I think that is a completely different discussion. Trying to find another way to replicate game.
Yeah. Well, for the accessibility part, I meant like with the as far as cards, with how easy it is to find them.
Oh
People who
yeah.
are sighted or have sight issues, uh,
Yep.
such as Braille cards, I think are much easier to come by
Oh,
than
yeah.
the dice.
Yeah,
So-
Yeah, definitely.
even large print like playing cards are easier to come by than
Yeah.
like a large print dice.
Yeah. But then again, and this is one of those things. It all comes down, I think, to the player reaction and how they react to it overall. And so I really want to, that's one of those things last episode we talked about the D12 and players' reactions. How do you feel that the cards impact? And we kind of touched on this already, but do you feel like there's an impact on the engagement and interaction during the
Yeah.
game when it's
Oh,
those
it depends
cards?
on the game. It really does depend on the game.
Yeah.
Because some of the games that we've mentioned and some that I'm sure we will be mentioning over the course of this discussion, the suits matter. Where the usage of the suit is either going to have a mechanical or narrative effect on the game. I know that people love using some of the campfire mechanic from Savage Worlds because the card that you draw, the suit will determine what type of story you are about to tell. And that's just a narrative only use. A lot of the solo games do the same thing where the suit does matter. And I'm guilty of it myself in my own games. The suit will determine not only what you can do, but how does it flavor the narrative for good or for ill. So
Yeah.
suits change the entire game, literally, because now the number is only one facet of what's happening. The suit can just change everything on its ear in one go. And I'll shut up now and hand
No,
somebody
no,
else.
that's
I
a
don't know. John,
beautiful
do you
point
mind
to
if I-
make. Yes, please go.
Do you mind if I jump in on that?
Yes,
'Cause
please.
You are, Michael, you're nailing exactly one of the things I wanted to say. As far as accessibility, you can literally go to any gas station, and every single gas station sells a deck of cards. They don't always sell D6s. So they're easily accessible. They got Braille, they got large font, large print. But a deck of cards by itself, you got a D2. Do you draw red? Do you draw black? You got a D4. Okay. Do you draw one of the four suits? You have a D13 if you're drawing ace through king. You have a technically D14. It's not a balanced one if you're including jokers. You also have a D52 and anything under 52 depending on the number of cards you put in there. And
I
that
never
just
did it that way. That's super interesting.
there's
And
so
there's
many
actually
potential mechanics. Yeah,
Yes.
oops, sorry, go ahead, Michael.
Oh no, I was just about to emphasize that for you that there's a specific game system, the RPC system, that uses either the full deck or half a deck or a fraction of it,
Yep.
depending on if you're going for 1 through 10 or 1 through 6 or 1 through 8. Like it literally will build off of that, so you could just remove the cards you don't even need. And then, boom! Now you have an entirely different roll system built in just with this one single deck. Back to you.
Oh no, and there's so many games that do this well, and that is just the potential mechanics of a deck of cards. Now, if you could add in the different types of cards, you got tarot, you have bridge deck, you have euchre decks, you have so many different decks out there. When people say deck of cards, they usually mean poker. But I mean, there's so
Yeah.
many different types of cards, and on top of that, you also have all of the different ways you could do games. The way I look at it, there's three types of card-driven RPGs. There's the random generation RPGs, where everything is just tables and you're drawing cards on tables. That's basically what Suited is. You have cards as a resolution mechanic. And a lot of people, they tend to use the cards as a substitute for dice. And it's just, I'm just basically rolling a D13. Some of the suits matter, others don't. And then the final one is the cards themselves are the RPG. And that's where you get games like Home, Alice is Missing, Campfire Horror Stories, or Save the Queen. And that's not even touching on do you play the cards as do you have a poker hand? Are you drawing blind like you're playing War? There's so many different ways to use a deck of cards out there, and a lot of great systems do that.
Yeah,
Sorry.
and
My turn to
the
get off the
point that-
soapbox.
the part you mentioned there
Right
with
there
like
with you.
sometimes you just draw one card at a time or hold an entire hand. I remember once playing in a one shot of Savage Worlds where for initiative, instead of just drawing a card off the deck, we each got to draw 3 cards, and you then got to choose which one you wanted to use in initiative, and it gave you that option choice to say, well, I've got a very low card, I've got a really high card, and I've got, say, a middle card. When is it more important for me to go first? You know, it gave you a little bit more. To me, it changed the initiative dynamic of the game, you know, fundamentally, where it felt like I actually had more of a choice, which was always a big thing when it came to initiative rules and initiative order stuff, because for me, it has always been, you know, crossing my craw of just like, so I'm just going to roll this once and I'm going to have to suck up that roll for the next hour to an hour and a half. Are you kidding me? Like
Yeah.
Nope.
I have designed a game specifically so that initiative was never stationary because it infuriated me so much. But that one tiny little change, you know, basically did it for me. It's just like, there. Now I can totally, you know, I can totally swallow a bullet. No problem.
That's awesome.
So we have a lot of designers in our group today, but we also have, you know, I have never designed or worked with a game really, other than Never Going Home, that uses cards. And I've got 2 people here that aren't on that part of the field. So Sean and Nathan and myself, I want to ask you, you know, to pull you into the discussion as well. If there was a mechanic or part of card games that really attracts you, what would it be as a player coming into it rather than a designer? So
I think for me, so I've played a few. I've played Never Going Home. I've played Psychic Kids. I've played Necrobotics. Like Psychic Kids for me is the mechanic when you're pulling a card, or when the game master pulls a card, and you have to guess, you know, use your psychic ability to determine what that card is. It is really thrilling when they flip it over, and how close are you to the suit? Did you pick the right color? Did you pick the right, you know, ace, king, queen? I mean, I've never actually hit the right suit, the right card before, but I've gotten close. And it keeps you wanting to go back and play in those
Yeah.
worlds. I mean, it's fun playing a psychic kid. I mean, nothing's better than playing, you know, bratty Stranger Things,
yeah,
where everybody has a power.
and it feels good. I'll
Yeah.
say that it feels good when you get that close. And I don't know if that's an experience that I've felt anywhere else in gaming, really. To you know,
It is. I mean, it's equivalent to rolling, you know, a d20 in that clutch moment. You know, rolling that 20, rolling your critical success. But for some reason, when you're manipulating cards in your hand and playing them out, especially, maybe it's because I'm a Magic player, but it's just so tactile to just slam the card down or be like, ha, and you hold it up in their face, or, you know, yeah, something like that. I mean,
Can't do that as much with a die.
no, then you end up throwing it and it bounces off, and, you know, nobody enjoys that.
Or we try by doing like these ritualistic approaches to how we roll. Like I always 2 hands, I cup it and then I blow on the die and then I just drop it on the table, because that's exactly how you roll higher. That's how physics works, people. Don't you know that? You have to actually spit on the die to counterbalance the spin so that it only falls in a certain direction. You know?
Yeah.
So I think we always like to pretend that there's a way of controlling it, and cards give us that greater sense of control.
Yep.
Because we're touching it, we're making contact with it. It leaves our
Or counting
hands.
it.
yeah.
Counting
I
it.
think that's
mean, the old Yu-Gi-Oh, the Yu-Gi-Oh philosophy of heart of the cards is like, come on, you're going to do it for me. This is it. This is going to be the yes, heart of the cards.
yeah.
Nathan, how
think-
about for you though? You know, for you, is there anything that has ever drawn you into a card game?
Yeah, absolutely. Card games actually let me play TTRPGs in a way I never played before. When I started with For the Queen and The Quiet Year, some games like that, I had never done GM-less, no prep games before. And having the cards ask questions and lead us through the discussion and the storytelling along the way was fascinating to me, especially during past lockdowns and wasn't getting as many games. And quite honestly, people didn't have time to prep and go through a bunch of that stuff. So it led me down the path of skewing more toward GM-less, no prep, and that includes, Feather, Beak, and Bone, and just random games. The Sea Shall Carry Me Home. There's all kinds of games out there where are basically storytelling games that use cards and questions to lead you down the path to tell a story along the way. I also think earlier when we were talking about getting new people into the hobby, I've introduced numerous people into the hobby by doing GMless game. It's just like, we're just going to tell a story. We could look at the card, you answer the question, how you think your person would do, we move on. It seems to be a lower entry barrier for some folks.
Yeah.
So it's kind of helped in both those experienced people, and then also like forever GMs actually get to play when we're playing GMless games, which is always a treat. So I think it really honestly just opened up a whole new world for me.
Nice. Well, thank you, Nathan. I'm really glad to get an input on that because I think, and I'm hoping also our people who create games hearing that also is kind of inspiring. So, but before we move into the properties, is there anything anybody wants to say before we go straight into like games we ourselves like, recommend, and would like to show the world? Is there anything y'all would like to say?
I think it just, we were talking about that it feels different. I think, because of probability, a deck of cards is finite, but a dice is infinite. The dice doesn't know what it last rolled.
True.
It will simply roll onto whatever it rolled onto. But when you pull all the queens out of a deck of cards, there are no more queens left. That's it. There are a finite number of queens. And so I think that finality I think that also helps with giving players a lot of agency, and GMs as well, giving a lot more agency because you just sort of, you're only going to get, like, if your queen does a particular thing in the game, you're only going to get 4 of those. And then you're done, right?
Yeah.
And I think that has an effect both as a developer and as a player. As a developer, that if you're only going to have 4 chances to do that one thing, you're going to want to make it either really good or really devastating or whatever it is for your particular game. But as a player, like, whew, that's only going to happen so many times, or woohoo, depending on what it is. But yeah, I think there's that sort of finality issue. I think is
awesome
something to think about.
Yeah, Sean.
And also coming in from like accessibility, I know. Yeah, if you're trying to introduce someone, just the example, Dungeons and Dragons, it's like, okay, well, you need this $50 book, you need this sub $45 book, you need this expansion, blah 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 blah. Now create your character. And then, like what Ted was saying earlier, it's so much more accessible and easier. It's like, look, you don't have to worry about it. Look, I know you don't know how to. You think you can't imagine. We're going to build your character with a stack of cards. Look, you got a 6 of clubs. This applies to this. This is how it's going to affect it. And also the narrative is just like, you're just going to tell a story. There's less focus on a lot of the card games that I've played. There's less focus on combat. There is combat. You can't escape that in a lot of the worlds that are out there, but that combat is so more narrative. The cards guide you into the rule of cool way more often
definitely
than in other
Yes.
games.
Yes.
Well,
Yeah.
let's go ahead then.
And I wanted,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
actually,
No, please,
yeah,
please.
I wanted to add on to something that Nathan had mentioned when you had talked about For the Queen. One of the great things with that game is from the very beginning, there are cards that explain how the game. So in a sense, the rules are actually a part of the card experience, and that is just kind of one of those things where it just goes to show the versatility of cards, for RPG play.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly what Ted's.
That's awesome.
And it's just like we're going to use these to play, but we're also going to use them to teach. The flexibility that I think is incredible. And I can never go when that game is mentioned without, bragging about the fact that I got to play one of the early versions of For the Queen, still all done on cue cards. And that game, from its very inception, just hell from the very and that is just one, and that is one, but it's just like you could only do that as a card. Like you could try and turn it into a dice-based game, and it won't even come.
Yeah, truth. Well, my friends, it is definitely time then for us to do our what would you like to play? Or what game would you like to show the world? Now, I have one ready. If nobody else does, I have one that I don't know if anybody else has played or is aware of the mechanics. So, would you like me to kick it off, or does anybody else want to start us off?
No, kick it off.
All right.
Take the lead.
So, I have brought today a game known as Aces and Eights. Now, this was by Kenzer and Company, which is a great company. They made a lot of great stuff. It rolls. Its main mechanic is a D20, and strangely enough, the way the total that you're going for when you get into a combat is a 21. If you don't make a 21, there is something that I absolutely love. This is a fun little mechanic, and I don't know if y'all can see this. Probably not very well. But this is the shot clock. And this shot clock, it's got this little grid, kind of like a dartboard with different suits on it. Now, if you do not roll that 21, you do not hit them exactly where you wanted to. Instead, you take your shot clock and you point it, you put it wherever it was you were trying to aim. So if you were trying to hit them in the gun, you put it over the top of the gun to knock the gun out of their hand. And then based on your suit, it moves around. The bullet wanders based on how well you shot. So maybe you were trying to go for dead center. Well, you got a better chance of that bullet, even if you miss, going and hitting the body. Maybe you were trying to hit the leg. Well, the bullet might wander over to the other leg. And so I find that to be a fun and original mechanic. I haven't seen it around very often. So I wanted to bring this game and say, hey, if you can find a complete copy, make sure it has that shot clock. If it does not have the shot clock, the game does not really work as well. If you can find a copy of that game, wholeheartedly really recommend Aces and Eights if you want to play a Western-style game. It's, in my opinion, as far as like the hard West, like almost... I played in a campaign of it, and they ran it like Zorro, the Antonio Banderas one. And I had a blast. That's the best way I can sell that game, is if that's what you're looking for, this is the game that kind of does that. So, tossing it over to the next person who would like to make a recommendation. And of course,
I gotta wipe the drool off my mouth after
I know.
looking at that shot clock. Oh.
No, and Aces and Eights. Can I just go into a little bit about that one real fast, John? Really fast. Aces and Eights. It's a Western game because of Wild Bill Hickok, who is the one that created the whole Aces and Eights things, because he got shot playing a game of poker, and he supposedly held an Aces and Eights. The other fun thing is, if you're a wrestling fan, there's another notorious wrestling team known as Aces and Eights. So not only can you play Westerns with that, you could technically play a wrestling game. Okay,
hey,
I'm done.
there you go.
Go ahead, Todd.
Yeah, no, I'm good. I was just drooling at the whole concept, the whole idea. Was
Having that overhead transparency.
Magnifique. I love it.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
really
So
clever. That's really clever.
Yeah, they made a beautiful game with that idea. So just seriously, guys, if you're out there and you were involved in that, kudos. So
I hope whoever created that had a partner that cared as much about game design as that person did, because otherwise, that poor partner having to listen to this tremendous idea and having the inability to give two shits about it, it just feels like a wasted opportunity at that moment.
And Corey in chat just brought up, they tried to Google this game after hearing us describe it, and the first thing that comes up is the wrestling team.
Yeah. And for anyone who's listening to this on podcasts, the thing we're all drooling over is a overhead transparency that has basically a circle, like a bullseye target on it, and you place that over an image of a guy based on where you were trying to shoot him, and then you move your way out on the bullseye based on the card you drew.
Exactly.
So that's what we're talking about.
All right, so next game. Who wants to share another one?
I'll go next since I love talking, and this will give other people a chance. I had a really hard time with this. I just gotta say, John,
Uh-huh.
I could never pick just one. I have three in front of me
No,
that I
please.
got it done. But
And
the
you better be
one,
talking about this one at some point.
no, I
Oh.
actually had no plans to talk about Suited at all because I don't like bragging about my own stuff. But uh, probably the game that I'm going to talk about that got me into card-driven RPGs. It is so beat up at this point, the cover is falling off, but it is
Ooh.
Weird Games Through the Breach.
Nice.
If you know Weird, they're mostly famous for their miniatures tabletop strategy game called Malifaux. And Through the Breach is a RPG set in the same universe as Malifaux. And the tabletop skirmish game uses a custom deck of cards that are so gorgeously illustrated. If you like that kind of creepy horror type feel to it, but as well as the world is very steampunk meets necromancy meets like angels and demons and gods meets fairies, and it's alternate dimension with this weird, almost like Deadlands Wild West with weird technology that's driven by screaming souls, and I love it so much. But the thing that really got me just in love with this game is this is the only game that I have played in where the character creation is you drawing cards and basically doing a tarot reading for your character. And that
Nice.
tells you their past, their present, their future. It gives you their stats, and I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. But it is the game, hands down, that got me into card-driven RPGs. So that's the one I'm going to end up going with.
Cool.
Weird Games Through the Breach.
You
And-
run a game of that, you should invite me because that sounds amazing.
Yeah. I will say, and I will toss this out because I believe when last it was like not this Gen Con, but last they had done a reprint of that. So Ted, there should be more books of that out there if you ever decide to replace that one.
I have the entire collection. I don't know if I have the reprint of it. I don't think they really changed any of the errata or anything, but I have every single book that was printed in that line. I love it so much.
Nice.
The Penny Dreadfuls is what they call their pre-written adventure modules.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's one. And Ted, if we can, we'll come back around to you for another. Who would like to toss another one out there?
I mean, I can hop in real quick.
Yeah, heck yeah.
Because unlike Ted, I am not afraid to go ahead and shill my own material.
No problem, please.
Mostly because it's actually a small game. Literally, I originally wrote it for a zine quest, and I'm a very bad developer because I don't have a copy with me because the last copies I had in the house are currently sitting at a local game shop. So
Not a bad
yeah,
thing.
yeah. So it's like I'm a bad designer for not having my game with me, but I'm a good designer because I got rid of the copies I had at this very second. So win. But the game is called Dualities, and I originally wrote it as again, it's a Zine Quest project because I wanted a game where I could have a werewolf, a magical girl, a dude with 400 suits of power armor, and the various multi-form tokusatsu heroes because I do love me some Kamen Rider. And I wanted them to be able to be on a table, level playing field, regardless of the form they took, without needing 12 rulebooks for it. So instead of having to say, well, here's your magic hero, here's your sci-fi hero, you literally are saying, here are my forms, here's the pro and con of each form. So when you build your character, you take an index card of your base form, and each suit has a strong suit, literally, and a weakness. So say, for example, your werewolf in human form, you could have your nice, sharp sense of smell, but then you can have a weakness tied to it, let's say your silver allergy, because that's still going to impact you as a human. And I always like to reference this one because, as we were discussing earlier, combat usually plays a role in a lot of games, but I wanted to emphasize the narrative side. So, as an example, how I usually pitch it to people is imagine your werewolf at a ball trying to determine how is the mayor going to be poisoned. Well, I could play a eight of clubs and say, I know the eight's high enough. Clubs is tied to my sense of smell, so that's how I'm going to determine that's what happens. I know that it's a poison in the wine. But I, as GM, can look at it, or the GM can look at my sheet and say, well, you have your silver allergy tied to clubs. So you smelled it because you're holding a silver goblet in your hand, and now your hand is starting to smoke.
Okay.
So you literally are doing this back and forth with the narration, and you are utilizing these alternate forms to go ahead and further expand what you're capable of in each form. So again, I was pulling inspiration from things like your tokusatsu franchises like Super Sentai and Kamen Rider, where you have one character that can literally transform into 8 different forms, each one tied to an element or each one tied to a special ability, or your invokers that can embody elements of different animals or demigods or however you want to do it. So I just literally wrote this like 20-ish page role-playing game, narrative focused, using playing cards. And when I originally wrote it, I had a secondary goal of, can I write a game where $10 is everything you need to play? So here's a $5 book. Go to your dollar store, get a deck of cards, pack of pencils, pack of index cards. You're done. You are now ready to play this game, and you'll still have some money left over to get yourself a cheap drink.
Thank goodness.
So yeah.
I think that's an excellent philosophy.
What was that?
That's an excellent philosophy to approach a game.
I mean, it's okay. To do a slight segue, like being the broke nerd and always being a forever GM,
Oh my
I
God,
understand
I know
the
that.
pain. Yeah, I understand the pain of how can I afford enough material for my group to use? How can I convince people to buy in, literally? And how can I also get people to tell stories without feeling like they're trapped in one specific game system? As Bink mentioned earlier, I've already forgotten your actual name. I am so sorry.
It's all good. We know him as Bink.
So as Bink mentioned earlier, instead of saying, well, you need to buy the $60 book plus this $45 book plus these specialized dice, you don't need that. I want people to be able to say, I'm going to tell my own story with my friends, but here's a way to do it on the cheap to get you started. It's one of my most frequent sellers at conventions because it is designed to be that narrative-focused entry and not a mechanic-focused entry. And that's why that's my design philosophy on the card side, is I want people to not just look at numbers, but also how can they influence the narrative.
Awesome.
So that's dualities in a nutshell. If you like the changing heroes, whether it's a tech bro with 500 suits of power armor, your magical girl with a handful of transformations, or just a dude who wolfs out every once in a while when the moon is full, there you go. I got you covered.
Awesome. All right. Well, moving into another property then. Who would like to share another book?
I'll go.
Yeah. Please.
So, I mean, there's a lot of card games out there, and everybody here who has one, they're great. This is like the first Kickstarter that I ever did that was card based, and it's Necrobotics.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And just starting with the setting, this is set in. And correct me if I'm wrong, John, because I may get this.
No,
wrong.
please. Oh. Just saying, buddy. We got some lag from you a moment. Oh no. We hear you. Your video froze for a moment.
You're back now.
There you go.
Back now.
You're there.
Cool. I believe it's post-apocalyptic. Like population is on the decline.
Mm-hmm.
There's scrap heaps of past technology, but the coolest thing is you have engineers that take bodies and repurpose them. They make constructs out of everything. Nothing goes to waste, and it's this great setting. It's morbid. It's kind of dark. You can do a lot of things in it, but in this case, every player has their deck of 52 cards, and for each scene, you draw 6 cards, and that's what you have as your pool. And for success, you have to get combinations of 8, and that can be, if nothing fits your character sheet.
Yep.
Oh no, he froze again.
No,
Oh, did I do it again?
it's all good. We'll you're back now.
Yeah, I'm back. Yeah, if nothing fits your character sheet, like if you're, and it's broken down into like flesh, steel, steam, gear. Yeah, you could still play 2 cards that don't match to get an 8. Or if you play the suited cards, that's like 2 successes. If you play, so it's got a lot of strategy that the dice don't give you.
Yeah.
Suited cards, you say?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you some strategy because, like what Shireen was saying, it's like, do I hold this card for later? Do I play it now? How long is this scene going to go on? When can I redraw? Things like that.
I don't really need to succeed in this, so I'm going to play that ace now.
Yeah.
Assuming aces are low. And
Well, it's like, in this case, it's kings. Kings are your hindrances. So if you have a king in your hand, let's get this out at the top of the round so it doesn't impact when it's crucial.
Yep.
But yeah, it's a great setting. It's really fun, and the book, it looks intimidating, but the actual role play is really, really short. The rest of it is all settings and backgrounds and adventure ideas and amazing art.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to throw in most card-driven games I've run into. That's almost always the case. The rules for playing the game are like maybe 10, 15 pages.
Yep.
And then everything else is world building.
A lot of times. Now, I will also say with Necrobotic, I got the nice little special edition.
Pretty cover.
That is
Any nominated, so massive congratulations to them on that. And Mitchell Wallace is a really cool dude. So I love it, and I just want to toss out there for him. So Necrobiotic is the game. It's based on a series of French novels, and they are his company, I believe, or somebody associated with them, is getting them translated into English. So we'll even have the material.
Are they finally?
Yes, they'll actually have the material that this universe is based on coming to America finally, which I'm really looking forward to. So
And just so I can break a little bit, I've gotten to play it twice, and
with
his
Mitchell,
name just left my
yeah, with Mitchell.
Mitchell led the game twice. That was like really fun.
Yeah. So,
Sounds
absolutely,
super interesting.
definitely. All right. Well, moving through again, we're starting to run out on that time, but so I want to be sure we get around to everybody. Who would like to go next?
Well, I've got my stack here. So I don't know how many of you have not played Capers. Oh, you got it too!
There we go.
You got the hardcover. I didn't get to work on the main book, but I've worked on almost all of the expansions, and the lore is super fun. And again, this is one of those books where it's like, yeah, there's like just this much rules, and then the rest is like lore, and there's some amazing art. And it was really one of the games, like, it got me really excited about card-based role-playing games, because it was just such a breath of fresh air for me. I've been gaming for so long. I'd only ever really played, dice games, and all of a sudden getting to do this, and this being set in Prohibition, the gambling aspect just plays right into the theme. So the actual, like, that's one of my favorite things about it, I think, is just that you're actually like gambling as a mechanic in this sort of atmosphere of, and the great thing is, of course, you can play it with any regular deck of cards, but there are special, you can get a deck of special cards with art on it, which are amazing. The art is so good. And Caper Cyberpunk just came out.
Yep.
Which is a huge amount of fun. And it's also its own self-contained game. So you can actually just buy Caper Cyberpunk. And it's got all the instructions and everything in it as well. So if you don't have the original, you can just go straight to this. And the great thing about that one is that there's also a Moxie deck. So we just went crazy with all the cards. So like Moxie is a mechanic that you get to use as bonuses, and you can get a Moxie deck, which just adds even more. So it's even more. It's like special bonus things that you can do on your turn. And even did a Caper Cyberpunk NPC decks. So you've got all the stuff you need. It's all on cards. But I mean, this is all just fun stuff that I happen to have. I really like it. But you really don't need it. Like, you can just play with your dollar store, card game. And one of the things I really like about playing it is just watching how excited people get. Because it is almost like, when you're gambling, right? You're like, oh, come on, I'm gonna win this one. Like, just watching everybody get excited about that, like getting okay, I'm gonna take a chance, I'm gonna draw another card. And it's just the whole atmosphere, the theme, just being heroes in either the 1920s or, in Cyberpunk, you've got this sort of alternate future. Where you're really, you can play law enforcement, but I find that most people are more interested in being the underdog. And I mean, you just don't often get to be the bad guy. And it's a lot harder than it sounds to be the bad guy. We did an actual play, and essentially it was our group trying to start a mob, and then realizing we had to let it. We ended up having to get out of.
Yeah.
Involved with all these people, and then we were like, whoa, you guys are way too intense. We're out. It was really fun.
No, I will say that with Capers, like
these
my
directions that you don't expect. It's great.
Yeah, like my favorite part of Capers really is almost the gambling aspect of it. Like, you put one card down and maybe you're not happy with it, so you do another, and you're like, hit me, and it feels
push
that,
it.
Yeah, it's that 1920s gambler, moxie, gangster feel comes into the game.
I feel like I should have one of those like green visor things, and dress like a bookie or something when I run the game. Like, just yeah.
You need those arm cuffs.
Yeah, with
Yeah,
the arm
I was
cuffs
just
and
gonna
my
say.
little notebook and everything. It is one of those games where the mechanic is part of the mood, and it's part of it works right into the game.
Yeah.
And just one of my favorite things about it that totally opened my eyes to the idea that you could play games so differently.
Yeah.
And it's an easy sell. I found for a lot of people, it's a really easy sell.
And John, I got to comment on
Yeah.
everything.
What?
Also touched on something I love there. It is, pretty dice are great. I love pretty dice. But a custom deck of cards can go so many places dice can't. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, no, I get it. I back most custom decks that come with games. It's just you get more of the feel. Honestly, you just get more of the feel of the game, and you pull yourself further into it. And every tactile or auditory or anything that can pull you into that narrative. But thank you, Shireen. Next game. Who has one more coming at us? So, Todd, you're welcome to toss yours in. I know you've got something.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to go ahead with that. So I made one a while back because I, not only at some point in time did I want to make completely card RPG, I also wanted to make a LARP. But never understood exactly how LARPs worked until I actually gave it a shot at Breakout. And then once I saw it, was just like, oh, God, stage acting with like a couple of props? Done. So I have one that I made a few years back called The Deal. See if I can get my focus in. No, because my camera sucks. Anyways, you just have to trust me. It's called The Deal. Doing audio. This is radio, Hans. Come on. And so The Deal, basically, it's a poker LARP. The idea behind it is that the cards that come with the game are prompts that you use while playing poker as fictional characters. Concept behind it is that 4 players who get together for high-stakes poker, and during the course of play, you discover that one of you is blackmailing 3. And the blackmailer becomes revealed during play. And so there are the 4 character cards that are in here. There's the Suspicious Bastard, the Rising Star, Desperate One, and of course, Blackmailer. There are 4 scenes that are broken into it, and with each scene has a very specific goal of what it is you're trying to achieve. And then within each scene, there are 4 cards that are basically called twists and turns, and you mix them into the middle of the deck. And then while you're playing poker and the cards are dished out, if you receive one of these cards that has unique backing, you just make sure that you receive another regular card to go with it. Keep your twist and turn off to the side, keep it to yourself. And it basically gives you a story prompt. And those story prompts are based on a moment in the poker game. So whoever wins the next hand, you might accuse them of cheating. So in the first scene, it's all about starting to the tension. And in the second scene, it's about establishing the connections of, hey, where do I know you from? Oh, it turns out that we once spent time together. Turns out you used to run money from, I used to, like launder for your dirty business, all these other kinds. By the third scene, the blackmailer gets revealed. And then in the fourth scene, it comes down to the final confrontation of, well, what are we going to do with this information? What are we going to do to stop the blackmailer? How does the blackmailer basically try and prevent themselves from, being caught, turned over to the police and make it go? When I ran this, I came up with everything. And the beauty of cards nowadays is print on card, which, it just makes it so much easier. Because as someone who used to work as a press operator and working in print production, making cards used to be kind of like, damn it, so close. But once it became, drive-through cards became a thing, then it was possible. So I came up with a demo deck, and I went back to Breakout the next year and ran this LARP. Went so freaking well. We shared a room with another group, and they were playing some other game on the other side of a divider, and we agreed and we established that we wanted to do it where full cursing, all the language that was available. I played a washed-up a drummer of a British rock band who basically got kicked out of the band due to my drug. Over the course of the game, it turned out that the guy sitting across from me used to be my... So at one point, because prompted by the cards, the two of us start getting into a fight. And at one point, John, what's your language parameters when it comes to the show? Can I drop a few F-bombs?
Yeah, no, we are an adult show, so it's all good.
All right. So this guy and I, who I've never met before, and we have the safety tools. There's even there's literally an X card in the middle of the table. The game comes with an X card. And all of a sudden, he and I are yelling at each other. And at one point, for almost 15 seconds straight, we were just yelling back and forth, fuck you, no, fuck you, no. Fuck you! No, fuck you! A guy comes out from behind the partition, and he's just like, everything okay out here? And we're like, yep, all good. The entire table, all 4 of us turn and look to him. Thumbs up. Yep, we're all good.
You're all intense, and then you just drop character.
Yeah.
And then you just go back to...
Yeah, exactly. And then we go right back into the game. There is an additional twist that I don't want to give away, but there is a moment where it turns out that someone else in the game is not who they see. And it was just, and the whole time you're playing poker, but you're playing it as these fictional characters, and the cards in the deal help kind of bring that out so that you're basically playing this very Tarantino style kind of play that just takes place a single poker table with fake money. Or if you wanted to do real money and really get angry for legitimate reasons, you could do real money.
Wow.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, friends, Nathan, I think you might be our one friend so far that has not brought one. Do you have one that you want to mention?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'd be remiss if I didn't bring back For the Queen. It was my intro to GMless games and intro to storytelling games, and I know Ted has the box right there. Basically, for the queen is a group storytelling game where you choose a queen, a card that your queen is going to be. You each then come up with who your character is based around that queen and what you do for the queen, and you proceed to answer questions as you shuffle through the deck. And a question might be, the queen did something nice for you one time. What did she do? Or the queen knows your deepest, darkest secret. What is that? And you go around the table answering the questions as they come up, and kind of building off the relationships for you all and toward the queen. And then really it all comes to a climax at the end when one of the last cards that is passed is the queen is under attack. What do you do? And you can each go around and say, well, here's why I was the betrayer, or I wasn't the betrayer, or I was this, or I was that. And you talk about what you would do and how you would either protect the queen or maybe try to do something against the queen. So you make up everything as you go along. It's basically a one-shot self-stabilizing story that you're able to come up with. Played it multiple times with a bunch of different people, and have had a blast every time we played.
Nice. All right, friends. Well, I have a crazy idea. And what I'm going to say is, because I know some people might have other games they want to mention. I know I do. But we're running out of time. I'm going to do a rapid fire. So I'm going to hold up some books. I'm going to say, hey, this game's great. Go check it out. And I'm going to pass it off to the next person. So I'm going to start off with my rapid fire. The +1 system from What Inc. Games. Next week we actually have Garbage and Glory is going to be on our Seriously Let's Play on Saturday. So +1 is a system that What Inc. Games pioneers. It's used in Garbage and Glory, Psychic Kids. It's used in Heckin' Good Doggos. It's used in Never Going Home. So all these games use a very similar system. There's a little bit of nuance between each of them, but highly recommend because they are friends of the show. There are a couple I should mention, but I'm going to go ahead and mention, of course, the big, Daddy. Daddy gets mentioned. So Deadlands, check it out. Definitely another card game you should be looking at because it brings us to Savage Worlds. And he's not going to brag about himself, but since I have a physical copy, I'm going to say Suited is a wonderful game, and Ted made a wonderful game, and we actually have an actual play of it on our channel. Go check it out. All right. So I'm passing it off. Who would like to do a rapid fire? Anybody got something they want to toss out there?
System. Oh.
There we go. Let's try again.
Okay, yeah, I'll just throw out real quick the RPC system from Burning Games. They did Dragons Conquer America a couple years back, as well as a sci-fi game called Faith. And again, it uses playing cards as your mechanic, but each of those games is a little different. Faith is using a 1 to 10 system, so you're only looking for numbers 1 through 10, and each suit is tied to a specific type of action, and that's how they handled the randomizer and the mechanics. Dragons Conquer America is the one that got me into that, where it covers the time of the Spanish invasion to the Americas. So you're looking at conquistadors versus various native peoples in a fantasy setting. And it's using a shorter version, only looking for 1 through 6. Same thing with the suits. The game had a successful Kickstarter. I want to say it was 5 or 7 years ago. I still see some copies out in the wild every so often, and if you can luck into it, I definitely think it's worth looking into if you like your cards.
Nice, awesome. Who else wants to do a rapid fire? Ted, did you have any more you want to toss out?
Oh, I got plenty, but I'll go last because I have so many.
Oh, okay.
And you can just shut me up when I'm at my limit.
I don't specifically have a new game, but there are expansions for Capers. There's more Offworld and Vice, which I can't seem to find, and they all have different vibes to them. Offworld is a retro future, got a space station. Noir is like detective noir, dark. It's got aspects for ghosts and things like that. And Vice is super spy, James Bond style stuff. and there is a volcano lair, which I very specifically was extremely excited to write about. It was the first thing I asked Craig when he was like, "Can you write for this James Bond style thing?" And I said, "Is there a volcano lair?" And he's like, "Nobody's written one of those yet." And I'm like, "Dibs." So,
Nice.
That's a requirement.
it's absolutely a requirement. I was like, if there's not one, I have to make one. So that's my pitch. Go get in on those.
Cool. Anyone else ready to toss out some stuff? Yeah, Todd, absolutely.
Yeah, I got a couple here. I'll just mention very quickly. One of them is Sins of the Father, actually, which is by
Ooh.
Aloy Lasanta,
Yep.
Third Eye Games. That one, it's a card-based RPG where you are playing people whose souls have been sold to the devil. And it's one that was like really interesting. I mean, I know, Loy, it was definitely something that I feel was like the biggest stretch I've seen from him as far as design goes and everything like that. So I highly recommend. The other one is one that's from another Canadian designer who I've met, and I've really enjoyed this game every time I played it. It's called Hope in Humanity, post-apocalyptic card-based RPG. It plays in just like a couple of hours. Very kind of party game style to it, where there's like very little prep involved. It was very well done. It was actually my first experience at a complete card-based RPG. And it was one that was just the way that it's set up. It's a fair-sized deck. I have first edition here, quite a bit to it. I know there's a second edition that's come out, so that's one that I would definitely.
Cool. All right. Going then. Anyone else? Either Nathan or Bink, you good? Yep, good.
Yeah, I'm good. You listed all the games I would have listed.
Oh, I'm sorry, bud.
No, you're good.
Well then, Mr. Ted. Yeah, I
So
think it's
I'm
your
going to try to
turn.
keep it fast because I know you're low on time. Giving our friends across the pond a shout out. Internal Contenders is a gladiatorial system where you play gladiators that are having to fight each other. It's a bit of a PvP, but also teamwork, driven by cards. It's print on demand. It's very thin. If you want something a bit more modern, a bit more recent, just recently released, I just realized fairies and fae are a very common theme with card-driven RPGs. A very recent one that came out, I want to say last year, by Wicked Clever is Goblonia.
Yeah.
Goblonia, you play as a series of goblins fighting against the Patriarchy and trying to pull off a big ol' heist and fight against the big fae. Next up, I have to give some credit to just a couple of fast ones for the Queen. Alice is Missing. If you haven't played Alice is Missing, this is a classic. It's all card-driven. Everyone plays on their phones. You are a bunch of friends texting each other because your friend is missing, and it's driven by drawing card prompts. Home, you are people who are creating a map of a haunted house, and you are doing that by drawing decks of cards. So before the game plays, you pick what sort of genre, what sort of haunted house you want to play in, and there's a custom deck of cards that goes with each genre. And so you're drawing through those to create the house and come up with memories of you as kids. It's very Stephen King. I've mentioned it a couple times. Campfire Horror Story. It is done by the same person that did Necronautilus, if you're familiar with it. It is a story-driven card game where you're playing cards and you're building off of a game. Also a bunch of different genres. And then the last one I have for you, John, real quick. Probably the oldest card-driven game in my set, and if any of you have heard of this, I will be a little astounded. It is called Deliria. Deliria was released back in, oh god, it's not as old as TSR. I want to say it's early 2000s. Their whole thing is it came with an included CD-ROM. And the graphics are very like mid to late 90s imagery graphics. But this is very similar to Changeling. You are a regular mortal human who is dragged into the world of Fae and Fairy. It's very psychedelic. It's card driven. And it is probably, again, one of the very first card game driven RPGs I bought, if not the very first one, without my knowing it. And I love the note up here from the secondhand seller. I know you guys can't read it, those of you watching on Twitch, but it says $10 Geek RPG 6/29 2000 without CD. All right, I'm done. Go ahead, John.
So real quick, Ted, Otter Poet in chat says they have that one.
Illyria, really? Well, thank you, Otterpoet. Have you ever played it? I've met a handful of people who know of it. I've never met anyone who's played it.
You know, that's always a hard one, because that's finding the people who's played the weird outsider games like Necronautilus. I'm scared. Never had a chance to run. There was a game called Rapture: The Second Coming, which was by the same guy that used to write for White Wolf a long time ago.
Yep.
And that's another one people don't talk about or played. That Todd, did you have something?
No, I was gonna say playing obscure games is almost like saying that you actually read all 6 copies of the Death of Superman comic from back in the 90s. Yeah, you bought it because you wanted to keep it. You ain't gonna read it.
The resale value, the collector edition. No, sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we all bought into that one.
I may or may not have bought,
And Beanie Babies.
I may or may not have bought 2 of each, so I could read one and save one. Just saying.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, friends, we have gone through quite a bit there at the end. My hope is next time that we are all together, I want to do dice pool games. I want to talk about dice pool games because there are many games out there that do dice pools, but I'm talking about games that say roll multiples of d20s, multiples of d10s, or multiples of d6s to try and get that same vibe when you're doing Fireball. When you're rolling so many of a dice. So I'm hoping
There's
that'll
nothing
be
like
our next...
having that handful of ka-chunks.
Yeah.
I got to do that the other day. It was so fun. I was playing a necromancer and I had a pile of zombies, so I had to roll for all my zombies to attack. So I had this just handful of d20s.
Yeah. There was a show on years ago. I reference it ever so often called Vast, and one of the characters had a 20-gallon pallet. Or not 20 gallon, but 10, for gallons of milk. It was a pallet used for that they put all their dice in, and they would just literally shake it back and forth with all their dice for their stream. And I will never forget that. I loved that moment. We're going to talk about dice games, dice pool games next episode when we bring this show back. I will say that hopefully this show makes another round before the end of the year. I've got a lot of health issues that I'll be taking care of over the next few months, so this one might be on hiatus ever so often. But, friends, this is what we want to do. We want you to know that gaming is amazing, and there's so much going on out there. I mentioned on another show I was on recently that there was a game jam taking place over on Itch. 14,000 entrants, 14,000 people who wanted to make games and try a game jam and say, hey, can I make something cool? So the hobby is exploding. Get out there, enjoy what's coming, and find something, because each one of us are finding our own little niche games and things that really speak to us. I guarantee there's something out there for you, regardless of if you've been gaming for eternity or if you just recently started. So, friends, thank you so much for tuning in tonight and joining us on this retrospective. We look forward to doing another one soon. Night, everybody.
Bye.
Fast Moving Podcast presents The Tome Travelers.